Hello everyone. Today we are going to start a new chapter in physics, that is chapter 10, gravitation. Now in previous chapter we have learned that force is required to change the speed and direction of motion of an object. That is, we learned that force is the cause of motion. Now when any object falls upward, then it always move in a downward direction. So, we always observe that when any object if we drop any object from certain height, then it always move downward towards earth. Then why the planets or moon does not drop towards the earth? So Sir Isaac Newton stated that the force is responsible for this, and that force is called as the gravitational force. So we have to learn in this chapter what is gravitation and universal law of gravitation. Then motion of object under the influence of gravitational force of earth. Then what is the difference between mass and weight? First we have to understand what do you mean by mass and weight, and then what is the difference between mass and weight. Then in flotation, so the chapter is related with gravitation and flotation. So under the gravitation there is a sub part, flotation. So in flotation we have to see what is thrust, then pressure, then what do you mean by the thrust force, then Archimedes principle and its application, and relative density. So first of all we will start with what is gravitation or the gravitational force. Now whenever any object throw upward, it always move downward. When an apple fell on the Newton's head sitting under the tree, he thought that if earth can attract an apple, then it can attract moon also. So for this we consider an activity, that is, if we tie a thread to a chalk, or you can tie a thread to the stone and move the thread. So as soon as we move the thread, then the stone moves in a circular direction like this. So when we move the thread, then the stone moves in circular direction. But when we release the thread, what happens? As soon as we release the thread, then this chalk moves in. So as soon as we release the thread, then chalk moves in a straight line. So when we release the thread, the chalk moves in a straight line. Okay, so whenever any object moves in a circular motion, then the speed of that object at every point may be same, but as the direction gets changed at every point, therefore its velocity gets changed. Means whenever any object move in a circular orbit or move in a circular path, then the velocity of the object at every point gets changed because the direction gets changed. And as there is change in velocity, then the object possesses an acceleration. So we say that the object which is moved in a circular path it is in acceleration, or it is an accelerated object. So whenever any object, so like this, as we move the stone or move the chalk in circular orbit, so this chalk move in a circular path. So why this chalk move in a circular path? Because there is a force exerted by our hand through this thread towards the chalk, because there is an connection between thread and our this chalk and our hand. The connection is only because the thread. So who exert the force? This thread exert the force on the chalk, so that the chalk moves in circular. The chalk move in a circular path. Though the force exerted by our hand through the thread, directly thread does not exert the force, but that force is exerted by the thread on the chalk, and therefore the chalk move in a circular path. So similarly, it means that the force exerted on a body moving in a circular exerted on a body moving in circular path at its center or toward the center, and that force is called the centripetal force, or we call it as a center seeking force. And due to that centripetal force, the stone or the chalk can be moved in a circular path. So similarly we can say that whenever the moon revolving around the earth, or we can say the planets revolving around the sun, it is because of the centripetal force, and therefore the moon can revolve around the earth because of the centripetal force. It means that there is a force between earth and the moon. So who exert the force? The earth exert the force on the moon, and due to that force the moon revolving around the earth and does not drop on the earth. Why? Because just like thread here, the thread act as a media. So the thread act as a media between the hand or between the finger and the stone or the chalk. Similarly, that centripetal force is the media between the earth and the moon, so that the moon revolving around the earth. So, but who exert this force? The earth exert this force, but that force is the centripetal force. So due to that centripetal force, the moon revolving around the earth, means there is a force of attraction between earth and moon, and therefore the moon revolving around the earth. And in earlier chapter we already learned about the Newton's laws of motion. We have already learned the Newton's 3 laws of motion, that is Newton's first law, that is the law of inertia. Newton's second law is law of momentum, and the Newton's third law, that is law of action and reaction. So according to the Newton's second and third law, what is Newton's second law? That is the change in momentum is directly proportional to the force, and the third law is nothing but to every action there is equal and opposite reaction. So in the universe there are number of objects, and that number of objects exert force on each other. So maybe that force equal and opposite, but because of the mass. So according to the Newton's second and third law, each and every mass, if we consider the earth, then the mass of every object as compared to the earth is very small. So if we consider any stone, or if we consider an apple or anything, so anything that moves through or that moves upward, it always falls downward, because this each and every object also exert force on the earth, but the mass of the earth is so much large as compared to the object, and therefore the object get attracted towards the earth, and earth does not get attracted toward the object, though the force though the both object exert force on each other. Means each and every object exert force on the earth, but because of the mass of the earth is too large, therefore the object get attracted towards the earth, and therefore any object that throw upward, it always get attracted towards the earth, and earth does not get attracted toward the object because of its large mass. So both the object exert force on each other, and therefore that force is called as the gravitational force. So therefore Newton concludes that the force between, in the universe there is a force of attraction between the two objects, and that force of attraction is called as the gravitational force. So what is gravitational force? So gravitational force means the force of attraction between objects. It's called as gravitational force. So in the universe there are number of objects, and that number between that number of objects there is a force of attraction, and that force of attraction between the object is called as gravitational force. Means in the universe each and every planet has its own gravitational force, just like moon. So just like earth. So the moon is under the influence of gravitational force of earth, and therefore the moon revolves around the earth, but other planet does not revolve around the earth. Why? Because it is not under the influence of the gravitational force of the earth. So the moon under the influence of the gravitational force of the earth, and therefore it revolve around the earth, and that is because of, and that force we called it as the centripetal force. Because why the centripetal force? Because the force exerted by earth on the moon, which is that force is the center seeking force, or we can say the force is exerted towards the center, or we can say that towards the earth, and therefore that is called the centripetal force. So what is centripetal force? That is also important. Centripetal force. Centripetal force means the force on the body moving in a circular path. The force on the body moving in a circular path towards the center is called as centripetal force. And due to that centripetal force, the moon revolving around the earth, and in the universe there is a force of attraction between the object or between the planet, and therefore that force we call it as the gravitational force. Newton stated that all objects in the universe attracts each other because of the force, and that force of attraction in all objects, that is called as the gravitational force. Now we will see what is the universal law of gravitation. Universal law of gravitation. Now this universal law of gravitation stated by the Newton. And now what is universal law of gravitation? It is the universal law of gravitation states that the force of attraction between two objects is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. How it states? So universal law of gravitation states that force of attraction between two objects is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. So this is the universal law of gravitation. So universal law of gravitation stated by the Newton, and this universal law of gravitation states that force of attraction between two objects is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. So let us consider two objects. So here we consider two objects, that is object A and this is an object B. So this is an object A having mass capital M and this is an object B having mass small m. So these are the centers. Now what is the force of attraction? Now this force is always act along the line joining the center. So this object A exert force on B, at the same time B also exert force on A. So all the object in the universe exert force on each other. So this, if we consider the two object A and B having mass capital M and small m, then they exert force on each other, but that force is along the direction of their center. Now here we consider two objects A and B. Then what is the law? The law says that the force of attraction between two objects is directly proportional to the product of their masses. That is, force of attraction is denoted by F, is directly proportional to the product of their masses. So if there are the two objects A and B having mass capital M and small m, then their product is M into M, that is capital M into small m. So this we call it as equation 1. And the next statement is, and that force, again this force of attraction that we called it as gravitational force, is inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. That is, there are the two objects A and B, and these objects are at a distance. Suppose these two objects are at a distance D from each other, then this force of attraction is inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. This is our equation 2. Again see, what is universal law of gravitation? That is, the force of attraction between two objects is directly proportional to the product of their masses. So the force of attraction, which is denoted by F, is directly proportional to the product of their masses, that is capital M into small m. So this will be the equation 1, and inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. So these two objects A and B are at a distance D from each other, or they are separated from each other by distance D. Therefore, that force of attraction is inversely proportional to the square of distance between them, that is 1 by D square. Now we can combine this. So combining equation 1 and 2. So when we combine it like this. So F proportional to mm upon D square. So when we remove the proportionality sign, we have to take a constant, and that constant is called capital G, and therefore the equation becomes Gmm upon D square. And this is nothing but the force of attraction between two objects, and that force of attraction called as the gravitational force. So what is the formula to find the gravitational force between the two objects? F is equal to Gmm upon D square, where F is the gravitational force, or we can say the force of attraction between two objects. Then G is the proportionality constant. What is G? G is proportionality constant, which is called as universal gravitational constant. It is called as universal. So G is the proportionality constant, which is called as universal gravitational constant. Capital M is the mass of one object, or here capital M is the mass of object A, small m is the mass of object B, and D is the distance between object A and B. So what is G? G is the proportionality constant, and that proportionality constant is called as universal gravitational constant, and therefore from this formula we can find the value of G, and therefore G is equal to F into D square upon mm, and this is the value of G, and this value of G is always constant, and it is found to be 6.673 into 10 raised to the power minus 11 Newton meter square per kg square. So Newton meter square per kg square is the SI unit for gravitational constant. And what is the SI unit for gravitational force? Whatever be the force, that force is always measured in Newton, and therefore the gravitational force is also measured in Newton. And what is the SI unit of universal gravitational constant? That is Newton meter square per kg square, because here force is measured in Newton and the time is distance is measured in meter square, and mass is m into m, therefore kg square. So the value of universal gravitational constant is 6.673 into 10 raised to the power minus 11 Newton meter square per kg square. So this value of G remains constant all over the universe. It never gets changed, and therefore it is called as universal gravitational constant. And this value is same for this force of attraction, or we can say this formula, or the force of attraction between the two objects, or the gravitational force is same for all the bodies. It is applicable to all the bodies which are terrestrial as well as the celestial. So whatever be the gravitational force of any object, then this formula is applicable to all objects in the universe, though the object are celestial or though the object are terrestrial. So this is the universal law of gravitation. So what is universal law of gravitation? So universal law of gravitation states that force of attraction between two objects is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. For this we consider two objects A having mass m and object B having mass small m, which are separated from each other by distance d, and therefore according to the law F is directly proportional to m into m and F is inversely proportional to 1 by d square. Then if we combine it, then so when we combine this, then it becomes F proportional to m into m upon d square. Then if we remove the proportionality sign, then we have to take proportionality constant, and that proportionality constant is capital G, which is called as universal gravitational constant. And the value of universal gravitational constant can be also find out from this formula. Therefore G is equal to F into d square upon m, where G is universal gravitational constant, F is the gravitational force, or we can say the force of attraction between two objects, d is distance between two objects, m and small m are the masses of the object, and the value of that G is 6.673 into 10 raised to the power minus 11 Newton meter square per kg square. And this value of the value of G, or the universal gravitational constant, remains same all over the universe, and therefore it is called as universal gravitational constant. So this value never get changed, it remains same all over the universe, and this value was found out by the scientist Henry Cavendish. So hope you understand this universal law of gravitation. Universal law of gravitation is applicable to all the bodies, though the bodies are big or small, and whether it is celestial or terrestrial. Celestial means the bodies in the space, or the terrestrial means bodies on the earth. So this universal law of gravitation is applicable to all big or small bodies. Now what is the importance of a universal law of gravitation? So first importance is the force bind the object to the earth. So this is the force which bind the object with the earth. Then moon revolving around the earth, then the planets revolve around the sun, and the tides are due to the force exerted by the moon. So this is the universal law of gravitation. So because of the universal law of gravitation, the object are always bind towards the earth, or whenever the object throw upward, it always get attracted towards the earth, or it falls in a downward direction towards the earth. Then because of this law of gravitation, the moon revolving around the earth, and that specifically which force because of the moon is revolve around the earth, that specific force is nothing but the centripetal force. So moon revolving around the earth or planet revolving around the sun, it is because of always it is because of the gravitational force, but the specific force we called it as the centripetal force, means those force which are attracted towards the center, because the centripetal and centrifugal forces are nothing but the gravitational forces, are under the gravitational forces. So all moon revolving around the earth or the planet revolving around the sun always because of the gravitational force, but the specific force is the centripetal force. And the next importance is tides are due to the force exerted by the moon. So if you, hope you understand what do you mean by the gravitational force. Then what is the law of universal law of gravitation, what is universal gravitational constant, and the importance of the universal law of gravitation. So hope you understand all this. Thank you.